Hello, Freedom Guy 55 here again, and yeah, everybody's doing this on YouTube. You know, getting their particular kind of favorite horror movies and such like that. Well, I'm not going to use favorite horror movies because most of the favorite horror movies are pretty much the ones that many individuals presented. So I'm just going to go through horror movies that I don't think are usually mentioned much, but yet are in some ways entertaining. And some I've actually chosen are kind of cheesy, hokey, they're not the best. Others are actually ones that many people don't even talk about as often, but yet have really, in some ways, good acting. And others, I would say, are just pretty much plain fun. Anyway, let's get to it. First one on the list is Freddy vs. Jason. Yeah, I know. Why would I actually have this? Well, the thing is that it's not the best horror movie, but it's a fun horror movie. And the reason why is that it's so unbelievably campy and cheesy for, at least in some ways, its time, and even today. But it's actually Freddy and Jason. And I grew up on Freddy and Jason. And not only just the old Freddy and Jason, but the actual hokey and the hokey, Freddy with his wisecracks and all of this other stuff, but also, Jason, the regular kind of everyday the Jason that we all know about, that's just really extreme, over the top, slices people, stuff like that. And it's always great to bring these kind of two particular kind of monsters together because I grew up on them. Yeah, I was morbid when I was a kid, whatever. Anyway, and it's always really cool to see something like this happen because it's happened before in horror movies in like olden days where you wind up actually finding, in the 50s where they wind up putting in two monsters together. And like, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman and such. Universal did that all the time. As well as also, we've seen monsters fight each other, in kind of really cheesy, weird ways. Like, Godzilla versus whatever particular monster you can, some sort of generic monster here. Anyway, Freddy versus Jason just puts a modern twist on that. And I think that's pretty cool also. The thing is that Ronnie Yu's directing in this film. Ronnie Yu directed Bride with White Hair, as well as also Bride of Chucky. So he's into the brides, basically. Anyway, this movie, the way that he directed it, was actually pretty decent. There's different particular kind of colors that he winds up using that are very, in some ways, somewhat impressive. That it's really kind of cool to look at occasionally. But the movie is just so over the top, and it seems to be absolutely so self-aware of what it's actually doing. So I think that if you actually get a chance, pretty much check this movie out. Kind of have a few friends over, have a few laughs, and have fun with the movie. It's pretty cool. Alright, next on the list is Pumpkinhead. Yeah, if you are a horror movie fan, you own this movie. I mean, seriously, you have to own this film. Just the fact that if you know that the person behind the director, or the director of this movie, is actually Stan Winston, his first directorial debut. And you might know Stan Winston as being the late, great Stan Winston, as being the man who pretty much came up with certain particular kind of creature designs like Predator and also the Queen Alien in Aliens. Yeah, that guy. And he's worked on numerous amounts of movies involving his particular kind of animatronics, as well as also his just regular special makeup effects. And this is kind of his first venture out into doing something for himself. And I just actually enjoyed it because, I mean, it just shows that he has this kind of... It's at a time where it shows that he has this kind of potential. If you wind up looking at the creature design there of Pumpkinhead, I mean, just look at that. I mean, that shows some sort of potential within what he has. And this guy, you could really tell that this guy will later give us these other, even more detailed monsters. Anyway, the movie is about this kind of guy who winds up hearing about a kind of legend going around called Pumpkinhead, who's this kind of vengeance demon. And one day, he winds up, his son winds up getting killed by these teenagers. And he's pissed at this. So he winds up going to the witch to resurrect this particular kind of legend, Pumpkinhead, to enact vengeance against these teenagers for killing his son. And there you have it. And the guy in the movie, of course, is, if you look at it, Lance Henriksen, right there. Yeah. You might know Lance Henriksen from playing the robot in Aliens. So if you have time, I suggest that, check this out. It's a pretty interesting movie, and you'll have a fun time with it. It's old 80s kind of, camp and schlockish. It's really kind of cool. All right, next on the list is American Werewolf in London. It's about two particular type of Americans who wind up going off on a path where they're not supposed to go, and they get caught, attacked by a wolf. It winds up to be a werewolf. One of them actually dies. The other one is scarred, and he has to deal with knowing that he's going to have to become a werewolf. That's pretty much the movie, and of course he winds up eventually changing into the wolf later. So so the one thing that's interesting, there are two things that are interesting about this movie. One is that it's directed by a director that's not usually known for horror. I mean, this is his first kind of venture into it, and then he gets known for it because it's really a good horror film. And it's got this kind of interesting blend of horror and comedy, but it makes sense because it's directed by John Landis. You might know him from making such films as Animal House and also The Blues Brothers, which is very interesting for a man such as him to go in and do horror. And then because he did this movie, he wound up actually getting the interest of Michael Jackson to do the music video of Thriller, or direct the music video of Thriller. And later on, he tried to do a movie involving vampires and the mob called Innocent Blood, and it's not really a very good movie. It kind of seems to be very boring. It's not as good as this film. There's also another reason why you should actually get this movie, why I believe you should watch this movie at least, is that there is this makeup effects in the film of a transformation of a person into a werewolf, and it's one of the best werewolf transformations I have seen in any film. It's really cool. It's not CGI. I mean, you see a hand getting changed, turning into a palm, or into a paw, and you also see a face kind of changing into a wolf's face. It's like, it's just amazing, and I really enjoyed watching this kind of thing and seeing that kind of transformation. It seems really odd, really weird, but yet it also won an Academy Award for it, which is really weird in that sense. You never really expect something like this to win an Academy Award, but it did. That's amazing. All right, next on the list is a movie that I consider a horror movie, but many people might not because they want to say, oh, it's just a thriller, because if anything's not either gory, a gory film or something like that, many people say, oh, well, we just can't classify it as a horror movie. I'm just like, why not? I mean, seriously, it's about a serial killer. Anyway, it's called The Hitcher. Yeah, I think it's a horror movie because it's about a hitchhiker who basically is this kind of evil killer, and he gets picked up by this kid or this kind of young adult who's taking this car from one particular kind of point of the United States to another, just to drop it off. Well, he winds up picking up a hitchhiker who's Rutger Hauer, and he winds up seeing that he's a psycho, but he survives it. And Rutger Hauer, in some ways, is going to teach this kid a lesson for, in kind of like the sense of survival, because he's going to make his life a living hell because he's the only one that survived his ordeal. So, I think, and the young adult's played by C. Thomas Howell, one of actually his better performances, let's just say. this film is very enjoyable because it's very much a good thriller. It works very well. It's on the if I feel mostly on the edge of my seat most of the time I see this, and really it does have some like kind of graphic violence in the movie, but it doesn't have that much. It doesn't really play upon that. It plays more upon the kind of huge suspense of whether or not this kid's going to survive these kind of attacks by this like really sadistic person. So, The Hitcher, check it out. It's pretty cool. All right, next on the list is Pick Me Up. Yeah, this one reminded me of The Hitcher quite a bit, but it had an interesting twist to it. The thing is that this movie is usually found more on the Masters of Horror. There was this Showtime original series that was it lasted for about 2 seasons, and it took all the particular kind of horror movie directors and had them make a film, just like an hour-long film with actors and such like that in it. And this was one of Larry Cohen's shots at it. And Larry Cohen did a movie called It's Alive with a killer baby and such. Yeah. Anyway, he wound up making this particular kind of movie because of that movie. He's considered a master of horror because of that film. Anyway, it's about a hitchhiker who kills anybody that picks him up, but he also meets a person who's a trucker who winds up killing anybody who he picks up, which is why it's called Pick Me Up. And they wind up meeting each other, of course, and they have this kind of huge, deep animosity to it in this kind of film, and it seems it's kind of cool how they wind up playing off of each other. It's just interesting because they fight over who's going to actually get their prey and so on. It's interesting. I really do like how these two characters kind of, interact. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of pleasantly well acted for a movie kind of as a horror film, and I enjoyed it just watching it. It's kind of cool. It reminded me of The Hitcher, so, if you have time, it's actually on Netflix, so if you actually have time to see it on Netflix, I suggest to see it. It's a cool movie. Alright, next on the list is Near Dark. Near Dark is about a community of particular kind of vampires and one of them winds up biting a pedestrian, and they have to take him in under his wing because he's, now changing into one of them. Well, the one thing about this guy is that he feels reluctant to ever join this kind of crew. He doesn't want to be a vampire. And apparently also the girl who wound up biting him doesn't want to either. She's reluctant. So it's kind of like almost seeming to find out how they're going to actually remove themselves from this particular kind of cult of vampires. Well, the movie stars actually Bill Paxton as well as also Lance Hendrickson again. And actually, the interesting thing is that it's directed by Kathryn Bigelow, who directed Hurt Locker. Anyway, she also co-wrote with a man named Eric Red, who you might know was the actual writer of The Hitcher. So, a little interesting thing. This is actually one of the better vampire movies, and I suggest you pretty much check it out. It's pretty cool. Alright, next movie on the list is Ravenous. Yep. Basically, it's about a character in post, or post or during the Civil War. And he winds up earning a medal for some sort of honor, but yet it's basically due to a kind of secret cowardice that he wound up having. And many people knew that, so they kind of isolate him to this outpost with nothing going on until something actually goes on. Some sort of particular kind of person winds up saying that there's this kind of dangerous person that's, eating other people because they were, in the wilderness and all of them were starving. So they wind up going out to try to stop this other person, but it winds up to actually be this actual person. Oops, I kind of gave you a spoiler. Sorry. But the interesting part about this particular film is that it's actually not a gory horror movie. It's not like, it's kind of like The Hitcher. It's not really a huge gory horror film. It's actually played much more by the actors in this film. I mean, look, you got Guy Pearce over here, and then you got like Robert Carlyle. You know Robert Carlyle from Train Spotting and such. Then you got David Arquette from Scream, and you got Jeffrey Johns, and that's pretty cool. All of them do a really exceptional job at acting in this film, and it's really kind of got an interesting kind of moral tale to it. It talks about the kind of combination between survival and bravery, and the kind of struggle that Guy Pearce's character kind of goes through in this film. So and the movie is kind of about the concept of Wendigo, where if you wind up eating somebody else, you wind up earning his power and his strength. And it's kind of like weird like that, and it takes that kind of concept and it applies to what if it is actually true. So, hey, it is a horror movie. It's about cannibalism, so, in a sense, but it's not really a huge gore fest. But there are some pretty nasty scenes. Anyway, if you get a chance, check it out. It's a good movie. Alright, you're still with me. Well, anyway, the next one on the list happens to be probably the most sickest and repugnant zombie film I have ever seen in my life. And yet, surprisingly, it's entertaining. That's the weirdest thing. And that is Reanimator. Yeah, I don't know. It's just the kind of concept. It just the movie kind of feels so much like this 1950s type of mad scientist movie. Yet it's kind of played a little bit, or kind of played extremely much differently than what you're actually used to. So and it's just really a very sick display. You got this kind of Herbert West character played by Jeffrey Combs, who just really does a good job, and the greatest thing about it is that he's just this really, cold, uncaring type of person who is more obsessed about his invention, which is this kind of like, solution that he tries to reanimate certain particular kind of, dead people, and he almost figured it out at one time, and he now believes that he's figured it out. This guy is so unbelievably uncaring within his performance that he winds up killing a guy, and then he just says, "Oh, I'm going to use him as a guinea pig in my experiment." It's like it's just because life just becomes so useless to him because he just says, I can reanimate it or something. It's just really kind of weird. But he creates a solution. He winds up making a guinea pig out of one of the people that he winds up killing, and this person winds up actually going, this experiment winds up going apeshit and starting his own particular kind of like zombie race and so on. At the it's like near the end of the film, but it's like, and sorry for the spoilers and such, but anyway, this movie is really in some ways so sick, so depraved, but in some ways really very entertaining, and I enjoyed it. It's like really weird. I'm morbid, I know, and it's not going to be for everybody, believe me, because there is a scene in this film of an actual head giving head. Okay? Yeah. Seriously. It's, a woman's naked and there's a severed head, doing that. It's not for everybody, but if you're a person who is a horror movie fan, I suggest you check this movie out. It's pretty wicked. Really. And the next one on the list is Return of the Living Dead. Yeah, this movie kind of plays much more like a kind of a spoof of the Night of the Living Dead, and it kind of spoofs it a little bit. It kind of, really becomes extremely self-aware of its camp, and it's like, kind of making fun of the original movie or spoofing the original movie, while at the same time kind of making its own horror movie as well. Anyway, the film is about these two particular kind of workers kind of guarding this kind of vats underneath that are made by the government, or supplied by the government, I should say. And they wind up opening one of them and unleash this kind of mist that basically in some ways causes zombies to rise from the grave. It's somewhat like that. Anyway, they wind up, kind of making references toward the movie in the film. It's kind of like, the movie Night of the Living Dead, that actually really happened, or something like that. They wind up thinking it, but they covered up certain things to, protect people. So they wind up kind of, taking a kind of halfway spoof, halfway horror movie and making a kind of different thing out of it. And it becomes pretty kind of funny and kind of, quirky and good. And I suggest that if you have some time, pretty much check this one out. It's kind of interesting. It's directed by Dan O'Bannon, who pretty much was the kind of germ, or the writer, I should say, or got the writing credit for Alien, the movie Alien, the original one. So if you have any chance, check that out. Because these, also, one more thing, these zombies in this movie, this is the first time I saw zombies run fast. And these are the fastest running zombies I had actually seen at that time. I mean, this was like in 1985, really. And when I saw it, I was surprised that zombies were going really fast in this film. So this was actually the kind of first movie that was ever really having zombies just run for their prey. So check it out. It's cool. And Nightbreed. Yep. This movie actually is a lesser-known film that Clive Barker had done, because this is actually directed by Clive Barker, the guy who directed Hellraiser and such. Well, he directed this movie called Nightbreed, and it's about, of course, these secret, or at least these monsters that live in secret. And one keeps on having a tendency to dream about them over and over and over and over again. And he doesn't know why. So he's trying to find these monsters, see if they actually really exist. He goes out and he finds them, and he gets bitten by one. All of a sudden, he goes through changes, and he winds up becoming a monster himself. Well, all of a sudden, these monsters who don't want to harm anybody, they wind up becoming the kind of anti-heroes of this film, and that the humans in the movie become the evil monsters. So it's kind of like taking a huge twist on this kind of concept of the monsters are not bad, it's the humans that are. And also, this movie stars Craig Sheffer, as well as also David Cronenberg, who plays this kind of like creepy serial killing psychiatrist. Not like Hannibal Lecter, definitely not. But interesting and still creepy. So if you get a chance, check out Nightbreed. It's an interesting movie. Alright, last but not least of all the particular kind of horror films, this is a film that actually can be seen by pretty much a wider audience. More people than you could know. At least to me. I think that it can be seen by a lot more people. It's a Halloween movie that is really made for more audiences than just adults. This film has actually become so much of a phenomenon that I actually, every Halloween, I always see a window of some sort of establishment have some sort of person kind of drawing on the window for Halloween, Jack the Pumpkin King and Lock, Shock, and Barrel and such like that. And if you don't know who those characters are, then you haven't really seen this film. But this film is really decent, and I enjoy it. And it's called The Nightmare Before Christmas. It's such a cool film. I mean, let alone, I mean, this is a film that's actually a musical. That's the weirdest thing. A musical. It's got some of the greatest songs that you could ever know. I mean, like, what's this? There's magic everywhere. Or, I'm your Oogie Boogie Man. Or, there's one like, this is Halloween, this is Halloween, Halloween. I mean, just a lot of memorable songs that you could just really get into. And the stop motion animation is just absolutely beautiful. It's just a piece of art. I mean, the entire movie is just a piece of art. And I just love it. I enjoy the dialogue that, Jack the Pumpkin King brings out. It's just really, really good of a stage performance by a clay animation character. It's just awesome. I love it. Anyway, the movie is about these particular characters that live in Halloween Town. And one of them gets bored with what he does over and over and over again, and he just wants something new. So he winds up wandering off, and he winds up wandering on to a different place. And he winds up finding out that it's called Christmas Town, with snow everywhere and everything like that. And he winds up actually being so interested in it that he's going to actually, take the place of Santa Claus and do his thing, and wanting him to do, Christmas this year. And it turns out to be bad. But if you haven't seen this movie, I'm just always wondering why you haven't. It is a wonderful piece of just art and beauty and a musical. I mean, it's everything that you ever would want, and it kind of just brings a kind of sense of joy out of Halloween, which is just weird. And also, you can also see it for Christmas, of course, morbidly, but you can see it for Christmas just as much as you can see it for Halloween, because it combines two of the particular kind of holidays together. So I find that pretty cool. It's probably, to my perspective, it's the best film out of all the films that I showed you. That's why I showed it to you last. So if you have anything, if you take any of these films, any of these films in, please watch this one above all of them. It is the best. And that's all the films right now. I just wanted to give, my version of what Halloween films that I think that really haven't gotten any kind of recognition. They're not my best, they're not my favorite. I mean, except for, Nightmare Before Christmas, which is a Halloween movie. But these films, I think, should be checked out. So if you have any time, check out 1, 2, 3, maybe even all of them, if you want to. But that's pretty much it. And I thank you for your time, and have a nice day.